Minasan konnichiwa, and welcome to the Board Game Dojo's Import or Not series, where we take a look at games from East Asia and let you know if they're worth your hard-earned money to import or not. Today we are looking at not one, not two, but three games from publisher Tactical Games, who last year successfully crowdfunded the game Atlas Lost. In fact, it was that successful Kickstarter and my excitement over it that I went out and bought these three games, and then promptly forgot about them for 6 months. But then I went back to them, and that's the important thing, right? These three games are Tree Lined Avenue, Perfumery, and It's 5 p.m. Now in this video, we are going to take a look at each of these games individually, giving you a brief overview in the hook for each before going into what we think of each game. And then at the end of the video, we're going to come back and tell you our thoughts on the publishers as a whole, both the goods and the bads that we see from these games, and then going into the import or not part, where we tell you the pricing and availability for each, and if they're worth importing or not. Just a reminder before we begin that if you like these videos, go ahead and like and subscribe. It really helps people find the channel. If you haven't checked out our podcast yet, then we'll leave that down. We talk about board games, we talk about the science and history of them. It's a lot of fun. We'll leave the link to that down below as well. And we've been using our Instagram more. We've been posting about any episodes that we do of the podcast, any videos of the YouTube, and some travel pics of Japan and more Japanese games that we don't cover in the podcast or on YouTube. So go ahead and check that one out. I'll put that one in the description as well. So with that housekeeping out of the way, let's get it started with the first game. We're going to go in chronological order today. So that means that our first game is going to be Tree Lined Avenue. Tree-lined avenue is a game in which you're going to be building, well, tree-lined avenues to get the most amount of points, using cards with some trees like this one, or using the animals like this one. You'll do this with the main hook of the game, which is this draft here. The draft works by setting up the trees for the next round from least valuable, which is in the corner, to the most valuable here. And whichever card you draft will be your turn order for the next round. So let's say black is first in the turn order this time, and they want this very valuable 9 card. Well, great, they can do that, but then next round they're going to go last. They will then put the card down. Let's say they put it down here. And it'll be the next person's turn. Starting on the second turn, you can start putting down the gardener, which you can put down here. And what the gardener does is attracts these animals. It can attract 2 when you put it down. So let's say they want both of those ducks, they attract them both to that spot. Now these animals are important for 2 reasons that I'll get to in a moment. Once this 6x6 grid is all filled up, you will then score at the end of the game. And the score is based on 2 things. One are on these personal objective cards that you'll get at the beginning of the game, and you'll get more throughout the game as well. In which part of it is, if one of your gardeners meets these qualifications, you'll get the point at the bottom. So for this one, it'll be, hey, if one of your gardeners has a deer on it, and in the row or column they have one of these lakes there, then you'll get 14 points. The other way to score will be based on where your gardener is, and how many animals they have on it, and how many of the same type of tree are in that row or column. So here, you can see that this gardener has 1 other animal in it, so that's 2, times 3 of the same type of tree in the same row, so that'll be 2 times 3 for 6 points. You'll tally this up for the row and the column for both of your gardeners, and then whoever has the most points at the end of the game wins. The components in this game, whether it's the finish on the cards, the player aids, and the overall aesthetic of the game, are really pleasing. You can tell that they really cared about it for this game. Besides that, I have really nothing else very interesting to say about this game because there's nothing really that interesting about it. Everything else is pretty much bang on average. The theme is fine, we've seen it before. The scoring mechanism at the end we've seen before. I think it was King Domino that we've seen it before, where it's like that rows and columns thing. And the gameplay itself is just fine. You can tell where the interesting gameplay is supposed to be. That idea that if you choose the better card for this round, that means you're going to go later in the turn order next round and maybe miss out on the card that you really want. So do you want to take that risk? But in reality, the reason that that doesn't really happen, and it brings down the strategy and replayability of this game, is that in reality, you only really have 1, maybe 2 decisions that make any sense for you. Of the 4 cards, there's only going to be 1 or 2 of them that are going to get you any points.
And this game just doesn't last long enough to where you say, okay, I'm going to get maybe 0 points this round, and hopefully I get more points to make up for it next round. No, you're just going to make sure you get some points. Because of that, once we played it once or twice, we felt that we had seen everything that there was to see, that there wasn't going to be anything new or interesting in future games of this. While being pleasant, I think the best thing I can say about this game is that it has set up a tree line as to what a 5 out of 10 game is for us from now on. If it's better than this game, it's more than a 5 out of 10. If it's worse than this game, then it's less than a 5 out of 10. I'm not going to say really any more about the game, but if you want to learn more about it, you can go check out Zia Garcia from the Dice Tower's video review of it right here. But overall, it was a pretty rough rookie season, but that happens in sports. Let's see if they can make up for the rookie mistakes and change it for the better in their sophomore season's Perfumery. Perfumery is a game in which each player is going to be working as a perfume factory, hoping to keep up their brand value by making new and interesting perfumes.
Perfumery is a game in which you are going to use your workers, in part, to be drafting cards. Now, I don't think the worker placement is really the main draw of this game. The main draw of the game is over here. Over here is your engine, and over here is where you're going to be playing a bulk of the game, because everybody in front of them has a top, a middle, and a base. And you're going to be using this as your engine, because this is where all of the combos happen, and this is the main hook. For example, take a look at this one. When you play the cards that you drafted, you can play it in any order. So here we start off with a white, and then we add in a white and a green, and that turns from a white and a green, which is over here, which then turns into this, which is yellow, gray, and green, and then that we can use another gray here. And what that does is allow us to satisfy this requirement that requires that we have 2 grays to make this perfume, which at the end of the game is going to be worth 13 points. The other hook to this game is that in order to play these cards, I actually have to pay a value that's equal to or greater than the value of the card I want to play from the other cards in my hand. But the thing is that I don't discard these cards. No. I have to put them back to where the other players can now draw them. Meaning that my first player advantage, my turn order advantage, is now gone, and the other players can now possibly pick up cards that they wanted to pick up earlier. At the end of the game, whoever has the most points made from these perfume cards wins.
Overall, this game is absolutely solid. To start with, the aesthetics and components, again, are just so lovely. They really set the tone for this game. And the theme really comes through. You feel like a perfume company putting together the right essences to make the new expensive perfumes for customers. And the art really helps it come through here. I love the art done by Yota Suzuki. Gameplay wise, just to start off with, this game really does advertise itself as a worker placement engine building game. And I think if you're coming into this for the worker placement aspect of it, maybe because you're a fan of Architects of the West Kingdom or something like it, I think you're going to be a little disappointed here, as for 90% of the game, you're going to be going in the same 2 or 3 spots. And really, there's the other secondary spots that aren't grabbing a card and then putting it on your tableau are very situational, like grabbing the third worker early on in the game. But that's not really what keeps us coming back to the game. Anyway, what keeps us coming back to the game is the same sensation that we get playing roll and writes like That's So Clever, or even Century Spice Road, and that's in the combos that you're building, the engine that you're building. The idea that you needed to create this very difficult essence, and you got it by starting off with, okay, I get 3 white from this card, and I'll take those 3 white, and the 3 white make the 2 blues, and then the 2 blues make a red and a green, and then the red and the green makes a yellow, and perfect, that's what I needed. It never fails to be a dopamine surge when that happened, when you've laid out this grid of cards that works out perfectly. And because you're doing the top, the middle, and the bottom each round, you have 3 chances of feeling that rush of, I just accomplished something more difficult. But on the other side of the coin, it never fails to feel a little bit punishing when you totally messed something up, especially by 1 card. When you just, I needed to make sure I had the top and the middle and the bottom. The middle and bottom, I nailed perfectly, but the top, I missed one card. I needed something to turn my red into a blue, and I just couldn't get it. So therefore, I just can't make any perfume this round. And when that happens, you can feel like you are falling way behind the other players who successfully ran their engine this time. And it really does happen that. It can be pretty difficult to catch back up after that. Luckily, though, this game doesn't last very long. In an absolute rarity, this game never takes as long as the box says it's going to be. The box says it takes 40 to 60 minutes, but we usually run it in around 25 to 30 minutes, meaning that this is a game that you can actually run back multiple times in the same game night. This game falls in a lovely space in the filler plus range, where there's juicy enough decisions to really satisfy hobbyist gamers, but at the same time, because the theme resonates so much and the rules aren't very difficult at all, it's great for a casual gamer as well. In fact, when this game came out and during COVID, it was really popular on social media as a great game to get into board games with. Overall, this is a very solid package. In fact, it's a very small package. A lot of game in a tiny box. This game makes me even more excited for the game that I already was the most excited to try out. It's 5 p.m. It's 5 p.m. is a greatly themed game in which you are trying to maintain work-life balance by going to work, making money, and coming home, stopping along the way in both directions to be as happy as possible.
It's 5 p.m. It's pretty straightforward in its simplicity. I've chosen the orange player for this one because this guy just looks ready to party. Every day, you will need to go from home to work and back home, stopping along the way at places like the convenience store, which, if you spend $1 there, will get you 1 happiness point. Throughout the game, you will be building up the city with places that have to connect to somewhere along your route. And this gives you more options of things to make your person a little bit happier, like cafes and movie theaters. Now, of course, these things cost money, so when you go to work, you can decide how much time to spend to make more money. But be careful, because every single day, you only have a certain amount of time before you need to make it home. If you don't make it home by the time your time runs out, you pass out somewhere in the street, and that definitely will make you a little bit more unhappy the next day. Along the way, there are also secret objective cards, like this one, that if you've ever lived in Japan, you will totally understand, which is where you go to the convenience store to pick up an anti-hangover drink, and then go to the bar to start drinking. And I love these. They're such a great thematic touch. And if you accomplish them by going in this exact order of going to the convenience store, straight from the convenience store to the bar, then you get happiness points. You'll do this for what spans for a week of time, and at the end of the week, whoever has the most of these happiness points wins.
In It's 5 p.m., Tactical Games raised the bar for the components even more on this game. Right away from opening the box, the components, the aesthetic, the theme just resonates through. You can't tell me that if you saw this game on a shelf, this very 80s synth wave, night wave cover, that you wouldn't at least grab it off the shelf to see what it is. By opening the box and seeing the lovely components, it just makes you excited to play. From opening the box, seeing that and seeing the components just makes you excited to play with it, especially when you see the orange guy that's just ready to party. And the theme resonates through from everything from the secret objectives to the whole idea that, okay, yeah, you need to come to work, you have to go to work, and you have to come home. You can't just pass out in the streets on the way back, or else you're going to be a little bit unhappier the next day. And that's just funny. But that is where, kind of like Game of Thrones, your expectations start to be subverted in a way that doesn't really make you very happy. And there's really 3 main ways that this happens, and I'm going to put them in order of probably least important to most important to me. The first one being is in the components. I just talked about how nice the components are. So you would think that you want to make sure that you have a game in which you have to use them. But there's never been a game of this, whether it's been a solo game or a multiplayer game, in which everybody has used the components for the full game. You just don't have to. you can pretty easily count it out of going, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces here. Okay, I have 10 time, so that's 10 minus 9 is 1, so I'll spend 1 hour at work. Okay, there's 10. Like, you don't actually have to move your person. You don't actually have to move the time down one spot. You can just do it in your head. So that's just like a kind of mild disappointment. But the next thing is that the thematic element that these side missions do, you can tell that the designer lovingly created them to be something that in Japan you are doing to make yourself happy. So you would think that these side missions and the design would encourage you to do them. But there are so many times in which you just ignore them. They just don't make any sense for you to do. In my last solo game of this, there's a secret objective that just made no sense for me to do at all. Why would I go all the way to the other side of town to do something that's only going to be worth 8 points for me when I have on this side of town something that's going to be worth 15 points for me? It just doesn't really make any sense. And in every game that I've played of this, there's been at least one person that has run into the same problem. Oh, I have the secret objective, but it's worth about half the amount of points as the same route that I've just done every single other day. I guess it unintentionally makes it a thematic game because at some point, you just start doing the same routes every day in a mundane life. And that brings me to the third thing that is probably the most disappointing aspect of this game. The company is literally called Tactical Games, so you think that it's all about tactics. You think it's going to be you sitting there mathing out what is the best possible route to work, how long should you go to work, and then how should you get home so that you can max out your possible happiness points. And then if you're good at doing that, you'll win, right? But not really. In another unintentional bit of thematicness, the card draws really decide who is going to win. There are some people that your life is just unlucky, where somebody else got everything handed to them on a silver platter. Now, some games do a really good job of hiding this, the fact that there was just an improbability that you were going to win this game. Like, Can't Stop. That game sets you up that, hey, this is a game all about dice rolls. There are some games you are just going to lose, but don't worry, it's going to be quick, it's going to be funny, it's just part of the game. This one sets itself up to be a strategic game, and yet it is so up in your face that somebody else just has it all lined up, all of the luck lined up in front of them, that there is just no mathematical way for you to win this game, no matter how good you are and how bad they are. Because even if you go half the same route, like after work, you go to their house, well, guess what? Then they get points for that. So even if you both do the same basic thing every single day, they're going to win. And in a game that you want to be strategic, you want to sit there and math out everything, when that happens, it just makes it feel... And when you're sitting there and you are watching this happen, it feels unfair. Now, when I had these negative feelings towards it, I looked online to see where some of the positive reviews were for this game. And the positive reviews were mostly in, oh, well, we actually just use this game to tell stories. We don't really play competitively. But, you know, you have the gym buff that goes to the gym twice a day. You have the guy who has drinking parties with his boss every day. So he has to go from work to get the anti-hangover medicine to the bar every day. And I guess that, like, for sure, that could definitely be fun. But again, it's just not what you expect coming into the game. When it sets itself up with some kind of expectation and then it doesn't meet those expectations, it just leaves me feeling a bit uneasy. So now let's come back to the general overview. The definite pro of this company is definitely just in the care that they take in the aesthetic and the components for everything. All these games feel great component-wise, and aesthetically it looks pleasing on the table and on the shelf. Now, all these games actually have something in common in terms of components, which is that all these games take up more room than you think they're going to take, especially Perfumery. It's like that really small box. It kind of runs into the patchwork problem as well, where it doesn't look like it's going to take up that much room, but because there's so many cards that you actually need a decent sized table to play this. But that's a kind of minor gripe. I also appreciate that for at least two of the games, It's 5 p.m. and Perfumery, the theme really comes forward. For a company that has said that they take inspiration mostly from Euro games, it feels nice to have a very thematic Euro that I can teach to people, because then I can teach it using the theme. But that actually brings up the first con, which is that for the themes, some of the gameplay just doesn't line up with it. Whether it be Tree-Lined Avenue with the turn order choice risk not really coming through, or It's 5 p.m. making you feel like your life is more mundane than happy. The theme just sometimes can be let down by the gameplay itself. But the next pro is that all these games are pretty streamlined down. Once you learn the games, you're going to be able to remember them a week from now, a month from then, whatever it is, which is really nice. But that also brings up another con, which is actually learning the game can be a bit difficult because the rulebooks are not, they're not bad, but they're not good either. They're just not conducive to learning it or teaching it. The order can be weird. The word choice can be weird. For example, in the Perfumery rulebook, there's a spot in which, I think it's page 4, they regard something that they don't actually teach properly until page 6. Sure, it's a one-page difference. You just have to flip the book over, but it's still a bit weird when you're reading the example and going, did I miss the rule here? Like how can I do this? Oh, it teaches me later in the rulebook. It's just one of those things that I think is going to get a little bit better with experience as the company, or maybe just having people have to learn it from the rulebook and saying, this part didn't make sense here. But overall, this just shows me promise for the publisher. You can tell that they care about the games. You can tell that they care about the theme, that they want to make games that people want to bring off the shelf. So let's bring it to the next thing, which is, do you want to bring this over to your home? Right away, Tree-Lined Avenue is the most available to you because it was picked up by Japanime Games, which also means that the pricing is the best too. It usually costs somewhere around $20. Now, we didn't like the game much at all, so we don't think it's recommended, but if you're interested in it, it's definitely the most affordable. The next in line is It's 5 p.m., which usually runs between $30 and $40 to imports. Again, we really didn't like it very much, so we don't recommend it for you at that price, but if it sounded like something you're interested in, that's not bad. And I know that there are certain companies, like I think Tanaki Games in the US, do sell it on their website. And finally, you have Perfumery, which is the next step up, which costs between $40 and $50 to import and is usually pretty widely available. And we just think that it gives you something unique. It gives you that combo-tastic feel, but in a very quick game that it can work as a nice little introduction to worker placement, but also just in building a very successful engine. I've shown this to both casual and experienced gamers, and they have both enjoyed it, which means that we are actually going to recommend this. We are going to give it a 1-star, which means that it's not an essential in your collection, but if it sounds like something you would enjoy, I think you definitely will. It is worth the import. Hopefully, this video has been helpful for you to explore tactical games, and I, for one, cannot wait for Atlas Lost to come out. I think it's going to be phenomenal. I hope that this 3-in-1 video helped you out, and if you liked it, please again, like and subscribe, and maybe leave a comment down below. We try to respond to everybody who tries to interact with us. And if you haven't checked out the podcast, definitely do that. It's a lot more scripted, so it's a lot less rambly, so it's not just me going blah, 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 all over the place here. If you want to support us on Ko-fi, then we'll put the link to that below, and that's, if you join that one, you can actually help us choose which games we review and teach in the future. As always, arigatou gozaimashita. Until next time, じゃあね。